When Kiwi came to himself a little, he was aware it was the night when the band played at the motel. Thither he went, because he feared to be alone, and there, among happy faces, walked to and fro, and heard the tunes go up and down, and saw Burger beat the measure, and all the while he heard the flames crackle, and saw the red fire burning in the bottomless pit. Of a sudden the band played Hickey Auo Ow. Of a sudden the band played Hickey Ow Ow. That was a song that he had sung with Kokua, and at the strain courage returned to him. It is done now, he thought, and once more let me take the good along with the evil. So it befell that he returned to Hawaii by the first steamer, and as soon as it could be managed, he was wedded to Kokua, and carried her up the mountainside to the bright house. Now it was so with these two, that when they were together, Kiwi's heart was stilled, but as soon as he was alone he fell into a brooding horror, and heard the flames crackle, and saw the red fire burn in the bottomless pit. The girl, indeed, had come to him wholly. Her heart leaped in her side at sight of him. Her hand clung to his, and she was so fashioned, from the hair upon her head to the nails upon her toes, that none could see her without joy. She was pleasant in her nature. She had the good word always. Full of song she was, and went to and fro in the bright house, the brightest thing in its 3 stories, caroling like the birds. And Kiwi beheld and heard her with delight, and then must shrink upon one side and weep and groan to think upon the price that he had paid for her, and then he must dry his eyes, and wash his face, and go and sit with her on the broad balconies, joining in her songs, and with a sick spirit answering her smiles. There came a day when her feet began to be heavy and her songs more rare, and now it was not Kiwi only that would weep apart, but each would sunder from the other, and sit in opposite balconies, with the whole width of the bright house betwixt. Kiwi was so sunk in his despair, he scarce observed the change, and was only glad he had more hours to sit alone and brood upon his destiny, and was not so frequently condemned to pull a smiling face on a sick heart. But one day, coming softly through the house, he heard the sound of a child sobbing, and there was Kokua, rolling her face upon the balcony floor, and weeping like the lost. "You do well to weep in this house, Kokua," he said, "and yet I would give the head of my body that you, at least, might have been happy." "Happy?" she cried. "Kiwi, when you lived alone in your bright house, you were the word of the island for a happy man. Laughter and song were in your mouth, and your face was as bright as the sunrise. Then you wedded poor Kokua, and the good God knows what is amiss in her, but from that day you have not smiled." "Oh," she cried, "what ails me? I thought I was pretty, and I knew I loved him. What ails me, that I throw this cloud upon my husband?" "Poor Kokua," said Kiwi. He sat down by her side, and sought to take her hand, but that she plucked away. "Poor Kokua," he said again. "My poor child, my pretty." "And I had thought all this while to spare you." "Well, you shall know all. Then at least you will pity poor Kiwi. Then you will understand how much he loved you in the past, that he dared hell for your possession, and how much he loves you still, the poor condemned one, that he can yet call up a smile when he beholds you." With that he told her all, even from the beginning. "You have done this for me?" she cried. "Ah, well, then what do I care?" And she clasped and wept upon him. "Ah, child," said Kiwi, "and yet, when I consider of the fire of hell, I care a good deal." "Never tell me," she said. "No man can be lost because he loved Kokua, and no other fault." "I tell you, Kiwi, I shall save you with these hands or perish in your company." "What? You loved me and gave your soul, and you think I will not die to save you in return?" "Ah, my dear, you might die 100 times, and what difference would that make," he cried, "except to leave me lonely till the time comes for my damnation?" "You know nothing," said she. "I was educated in a school in Honolulu. I am no common girl, and I tell you I shall save my lover. What is this you say about a cent? But all the world is not America. In England they have a piece they call a farthing, which is about half a cent." "Ah, sorrow!" she cried. "That makes it scarcely better, for the buyer must be lost, and we shall find none so brave as my Kiwi. But then there is France. They have a small coin there, which they call a centime, and these go 5 to a cent, or thereabout. We could not do better. Come, Kiwi, let us go to the French islands. Let us go to Tahiti as fast as ships can bear us. There we have 4 centimes, 3 centimes, 2 centimes, 1 centime, 4 possible sails to come and go on, and 2 of us to push the bargain. Come, my Kiwi, kiss me, and banish care. Kokua will defend you." "Gift of God!" he cried. "I cannot think that God will punish me for desiring aught so good. Be it as you will, then. Take me where you please. I put my life and my salvation in your hands." Early the next day, Kokua went about her preparations. She took Kiwi's chest, that he went with sailoring, and first she put the bottle in the corner, and then packed it with the richest of their clothes, and the bravest of their knickknacks in the house. "For," said she, "we must seem to be rich folks who would believe in the bottle." All the time of her preparation she was as gay as a bird, only when she looked upon Kiwi the tears would spring in her eye, and she must run and kiss him. As for Kiwi, a weight was off his soul, and now that he had his secret shared, and some hope in him, of him, he seemed like a new man. His feet went lightly on the earth, and his breath was good to him again. Yet was terror still at his elbow, and ever and again, as the wind blows out a taper, hope died in him, and he saw the flames toss and the red fire burn in hell. It was given out in the country they were gone pleasuring in the States, which was thought a strange thing, and yet not so strange as the truth, if any could have guessed it. So they went to Honolulu in the Hall, and thence in the Umatilla to San Francisco with a crowd of Haoles, and at San Francisco took their passage by the mail brigantine, the tropic bird, for Papeete, the chief place of the French in the South Islands. Thither they came, after a pleasant voyage, on a fair day of the trade wind, and saw the reef with the surf breaking, and Mototai with its palms, and the schooner riding withinside, and the white houses of the town low down along the shore among green trees, and overhead the mountains and the clouds of Tahiti, the wise island. It was judged the most wise to hire a house, which they did accordingly, opposite the British consuls, to make a great parade of money, and themselves conspicuous with carriages and horses. This it was very easy to do so, long as they had the bottle in their possession, for Kakua was more bold than Kiwi, and, whenever she had a mind, called on the imp for $20 or $100. At this rate they soon grew to be remarked in the town, and the strangers from Hawaii, their riding and their driving, the fine holocaust and the rich lace of Kakua, became the matter of much talk. They got on well, after the first, with the Tahiti language, which is indeed like to the Hawaiian, with a change of certain letters, and as soon as they had any freedom of speech, began to push the bottle. You are to consider it was not an easy subject to introduce. It was not easy to persuade people you are in earnest when you offer to sell them for 4 centimes the spring of health and riches inexhaustible. It was necessary, besides, to explain the dangers of the bottle, and either people disbelieved the whole thing and laughed, or they thought the more of the darker part, became overcast with gravity, and drew away from Kiwi and Kakua, as from persons who had dealings with the devil. So far from gaining ground, these two began to find they were avoided in the town. The children ran away from them screaming, a thing intolerable to Kakua. Catholics crossed themselves as they went by, and all persons began with one accord to disengage themselves from their advances. Depression fell upon their spirits. They would sit at night in their new house after a day's weariness, and not exchange one word, or the silence would be broken by Kakua bursting suddenly into sobs. Sometimes they would pray together. Sometimes they would have the bottle out upon the floor and sit all evening watching how the shadow hovered in the midst. At such times they would be afraid to go to rest. It was long ere slumber came to them, and if either dozed off, it would be to wake and find the other silently weeping in the dark, or perhaps to wake alone, the other having fled from the house and the neighborhood of that bottle, to pace under the bananas in the little garden, or to wander on the beach by moonlight. One night it was so when Kakua awoke. Kiwi was gone. She felt in the bed, and his place was cold. Then fear fell upon her, and she sat up in bed. A little moonshine filtered through the shutters. The room was bright, and she could spy the bottle on the floor. Outside it blew high. The great trees of the avenue cried aloud, and the fallen trees rattled in the veranda. In the midst of the Kakua was aware of another sound, whether of a beast or of a man she could scarce tell, but it was as sad as death, and cut her to the soul. Softly she arose, set the door ajar, and looked forth into the moonlit yard. There, under the bananas, lay Kiwi, his mouth in the dust, and as he lay, he moaned. It was Kakua's first thought to run forward and console him. Her second potently withheld her. Kiwi had borne himself before his wife like a brave man. It became her little, in the hour of weakness, to intrude upon his shame. With the thought, she drew back into the house. Heaven, she thought, how careless have I been, how weak! It is he, not I, that stands in this eternal peril. It was he, not I, that took the curse upon his soul. It is for my sake, and for the love of a creature of so little worth, and such poor help, that he now beholds so close to him the flames of hell. Aye, and smells the smoke of it, lying without there, in the wind and moonlight. Am I so dull of spirit that never till now I have surmised my duty, or have I seen it before and turned aside? But now, at least, I take up my soul in both the hands of my affection. Now I say farewell to the white steps of heaven, and the waiting faces of my friends. A love for a love, and let mine be equalled with Kiwi's. A soul for a soul, and be it mine to perish. She was a deft woman with her hands, and was soon apparelled. She took in her hands the charge, the precious centimes they kept ever at their side. For this coin is little used, and they had made provision at a government office. When she was forth in the avenue, clouds came on the wind, and the moon was blackened. The town slept, and she knew not whither to turn till she heard one coughing in the shadow of the trees. "Old man," said Kakua, "what do you hear abroad in the cold night?" The old man could scarce express himself for coughing, but she made out that he was old and poor and a stranger in the island. "Will you do me the service," said Kakua, "as one stranger to another, and as an old man to a young woman, will you help a daughter of Hawaii?" "Ah," said the old man, "so you are the witch from the 8 islands, and even my old soul you seek to entangle. But I have heard of you, and defy your wickedness." "Sit down here," said Kakua, "and let me tell you a tale." And she told him the story of Kiwi from the beginning to the end. "And now," she said, "I am his wife, whom he bought with his soul's welfare. And what should I do? If I went to him myself and offered to buy it, he will refuse. But if you go, he will sell it eagerly. I will await you here. You will buy it for 4 centimes, and I will buy it again for 3. And the Lord strengthened a poor girl. If you meant falsely, said the old man, I think God would strike you dead. He would, cried Kukua. Be sure he would. I could not be so treacherous. God would not suffer it. Give me the 4 centimes and await me here, said the old man. Now when Kukua stood alone in the street, her spirit died. The wind roared in the trees, and it seemed to her the rushing of the flames of hell. The shadows towered in the light of the street lamp, and they seemed to her the snatching hands of evil ones. If she had had the strength, she must have run away, and if she had had the breath, she must have screamed aloud. But in truth, she could do neither, and stood and trembled in the avenue like an affrighted child. Then she saw the old man returning, and he had the bottle in his hand. I've done your bidding, said he. I left your husband weeping like a child tonight. He will sleep easy. And he held the bottle forth. Before you give it me, Kukua panted, take the good with the evil. Ask to be delivered from your cough. I am an old man, replied the other, and too near the gate of the grave to take a favor from the devil. But what is this? Why do you not take the bottle? Do you hesitate? Not hesitate, cried Kukua. I am only weak. Give me a moment. It is my hand. Resist. My flesh shrinks back from the accursed thing. 1 moment only. The old man looked upon Kukua kindly. Poor child, said he. You fear. Your soul misgives you. Well, let me keep it. I am old, and can never more be happy in this world. And as for the next, give it me, gasped Kukua. There is your money. Do you think I am so base as that? Give me the bottle. God bless you, child, said the old man. Kukua concealed the bottle under her huluku, said farewell to the old man, and walked off along the avenue. She cared not whither. For all roads were now the same to her, and led equally to hell. Sometimes she walked, and sometimes she ran. Sometimes she screamed out loud in the night, and sometimes lay by the wayside in the dust and wept. All that she had heard of hell came back to her. She saw the flames blaze, and she smelled the smoke, and her flesh withered on the coals. Near day, she came to her mind again, and returned to the house. It was even as the old man said. Kiwi slumbered like a child. Kukua stood and gazed upon his face. Now, my husband, she said, it is your turn to sleep. When you wake, it will be your turn to sing and laugh. But for poor Kukua, alas, that meant no evil. For poor Kukua, no more sleep, no more singing, no more delight, whether in earth or heaven. With that she lay down in the bed by his side, and her misery was so extreme that she fell in a deep slumber instantly. Late in the morning, her husband woke her and gave her the good news. It seemed he was silly with delight, for he paid no heed to her distress, ill though she dissembled it. The words stuck in her mouth. It mattered not. Kiwi did the speaking. She ate not a bite, but who was to observe it? For Kiwi cleared the dish. Kukua saw and heard him. like some strange thing in a dream. There were times when she forgot or doubted and put her hands to her brow, to know herself doomed, and hear her husband babble seemed so monstrous. All the while, Kiwi was eating and talking and planning the time of their return, and thanking her for saving him, and fondling her, and calling her the true helper after all. He laughed at the old man that was a fool enough to buy that bottle. A worthy man, he seemed, Kiwi said. But no one can judge by appearances, for why did the old reprobate require the bottle? My husband, said Kukua humbly. His purpose may have been good. Kiwi laughed like an angry man. Fiddle-dee-dee, cried Kiwi. An old rogue, I tell you, and an old ass to boot, for the bottle was hard enough to sell at 4 centimes, and at 3 it will be quite impossible. The margin is not broad enough. The thing begins to smell of scorching. Brrr, said he, and shuddered. It is true. I bought it myself, at 1 cent, when I knew not there were smaller coins. I was a fool for my pains. There will never be found another, and whoever has that bottle now will carry it to the pit. Oh, my husband, said Kukua, is it not a terrible thing to save oneself by the eternal ruin of another? It seems to me I could not laugh. I would be humbled. I would be filled with melancholy. I would pray for the poor holder. Then Kiwi, because he felt the truth of what she said, grew the more angry. Highty-tighty, cried he. You may be filled with melancholy, if you please. It is not the mind of a good wife. If you thought at all of me, you would sit shamed. Thereupon he went out, and Kukua was alone. What chance had she to sell that bottle at 2 centimes? None, she perceived. And if she had any, here was her husband hurrying her away to a country where there was nothing lower than 1 cent. And here, on the morrow of her sacrifice, was her husband leaving her and blaming her. She would not even try to profit by what time she had, but sat in the house, and now had the bottle out and viewed it with unutterable fear, and now with loathing, hid it out of sight. By and by, Kiwi came back, and would have her take a drive. My husband, I am ill, she said. I am out of heart. Excuse me, I can take no pleasure. Then was Kiwi more wroth than ever. With her, because he thought she was brooding over the case of the old man, and with himself, because he thought she was right and was ashamed to be so happy. This is your truth, cried he, and this your affection. Your husband is just saved from eternal ruin, which he encountered for the love of you, and you can take no pleasure. Kukua, you have a disloyal heart. He went forth again furious, and wandered in the town all day. He met friends, and drank with them. They hired a carriage and drove into the country, and there drank again. All the time, Kiwi was ill at ease, because he was taking his pastime while his wife was sad, and because he knew in his heart that she was more right than he, and the knowledge made him drink the deeper. Now, there was an old brutal Haole drinking with him, one that had been a boatswain of a whaler, a runaway, a digger in gold mines, a convict in prisons. He had a low mind and a foul mouth. He loved to drink and to see others drunken, and he pressed the glass upon Kiwi. Soon there was no more money in the company. "Hear you," says the boatswain. "You are rich, you have been always saying. You have a bottle, or some foolishness." "Yes," says Kiwi, "I am rich. I will go back and get some money from my wife, who keeps it." "That's a bad idea, mate," said the boatswain. "Never you trust a petticoat with $1. They're all as false as water. You keep an eye on her." Now this word struck in Kiwi's mind, for he was muddled with what he had been drinking. "I should not wonder but she was false indeed," thought he. "Why else should she be so cast down at my release? But I will show her I am not the man to be fooled. I will catch her in the act." Accordingly, when they were back in town, Kiwi bade the boatswain wait for him at the corner by the old calaboose, and went forward up the avenue alone to the door of his house. The night had come again. There was a light within, but never a sound, and Kiwi crept about the corner, opened the back door softly, and looked in. There was Kakua on the floor, the lamp at her side. Before her was a milk-white bottle, with a round belly and a long neck, and as she viewed it, Kakua wrung her hands. A long time Kiwi stood and looked in the doorway. At first he was struck stupid, and then fear fell upon him that the bargain had been made amiss, and the bottle had come back to him as it came at San Francisco, and at his knees were loosened, and the fumes of the wine departed from his head like mist off a river in the morning. And then he had another thought, and it was a strange one, that made his cheeks to burn. "I must make sure of this," thought he. So he closed the door and went softly round the corner again, and then came noisily in, as though he were but now returned. And lo, by the time he opened the front door, no bottle was to be seen, and Kakua sat in a chair and started up like one awakened out of sleep. "I have been drinking all day and making merry," said Kiwi. "I have been with good companions, and now I only come back for money, and return to drink, and carouse with them again." Both his face and voice were as stern as judgment, but Kakua was too troubled to observe. "You do well to use your own, my husband," said she, and her words trembled. "Oh, I do well in all things," said Kiwi, and he went straight to the chest and took out money. But he looked besides in the corner where they kept the bottle, and there was no bottle there. At that the chest heaved upon the floor like a sea billow, and the house spun about him like a wreath of smoke, for he saw she was lost now, and there was no escape. "It is what I feared," he thought. "It is she who has bought it." And then he came to himself a little and rose up, but the sweat streamed on his face as thick as the rain and as cold as the well water. "Kakua," said he, "I said to you today what ill became me, and now I return to house with my jolly companions." And at that he laughed a little quietly. "I will take more pleasure in the cup if you forgive me." She clasped his knees in a moment. She kissed his knees with flowing tears. "Oh," she cried, "I ask but a kind word." "Let us never one think hardly of the other," said Kiwi, and was gone out of the house. Now the money that Kiwi had taken was only some of that store of centime pieces they had laid in at their arrival. It was very sure he had no mind to be drinking. His wife had given her soul for him. Now he must give his for hers. No other thought was in the world with him. At the corner, by the old calaboose, there was the boatswain waiting. "My wife has the bottle," said Kiwi, "and unless you help me to recover it, there can be no more money and no more liquor tonight." "You do not mean to say you are serious about that bottle?" cried the boatswain. "There is the lamp," said Kiwi. "Do I look as if I was jesting?" "That is so," said the boatswain. "You look as serious as a ghost." "Well then," said Kiwi, "here are 2 centimes. You just go to my wife in the house and offer her these for the bottle, which, if I am not much mistaken, she will give you instantly. Bring it to me here, and I will buy it back from you for once, for that is the law with this bottle, that it still must be sold for a less sum. But whatever you do, never breathe a word to her that you have come from me." "Mate, I wonder, are you making a fool of me?" asked the boatswain. "It will do you no harm if I am," returned Kiwi. "That is so, mate," said the boatswain. "And if you doubt me," added Kiwi, "you can try. As soon as you are clear of the house, wish to have your pocket full of money, or a bottle of the best rum, or what you please, and you will see the virtue of the thing." "Very well, Kanaka," says the boatswain. "I will try. But if you are having your fun out of me, I will take my fun out of you with a belaying pin." So the whaler men went off up the avenue, and Kiwi stood and waited. It was near the same spot where Kakua had waited the night before, but Kiwi was more resolved, and never faltered in his purpose, only his soul was bitter with despair. It seemed a long time he had to wait before he heard a voice singing in the darkness of the avenue. He knew the voice to be the boatswain's, but it was strange how drunken it appeared upon a sudden. Next the man himself came stumbling into the light of the lamp. He had the devil's bottle buttoned in his coat. Another bottle was in his hand, and even as he came in view, he raised it to his mouth and drank. "You have it," said Kiwi. "I see that." "Hands off!" cried the boatswain, jumping back. "Take a step near me, and I'll smash your mouth. You thought you could make a cat's paw of me, did you?" "What do you mean?" cried Kiwi. "Mean?" cried the boatswain. "This is a pretty good bottle, this is. That's what I mean. How I got it for 2 centimes I can't make out, But I am sure you shan't have it for one." "You mean you won't sell?" gasped Kiwi. "No, sir," cried the boatswain. "But I'll give you a drink of the rum, if you like." "I tell you," said Kiwi, "the man who has that bottle goes to hell." "I reckon I'm going anyway," returned the sailor. "And this bottle's the best thing to go with I've struck yet." "No, sir," he cried again. "This is my bottle now, and you can go and fish for another." "Can this be true?" Kiwi cried. "For your own sake, I beseech you, sell it me." "I don't value any of your talk," replied the boatswain. "You thought I was a flat. Now you see I'm not, and there's an end. If you won't have a swallow of the rum, I'll have one myself. Here's your health, and good night to you." So off he went down the avenue towards town, and there goes the bottle out of the story. But Kiwi ran to Kokua, light as the wind, and great was their joy that night, and great since then has been the peace of all their days in the bright house.